Juniper Books presents The Luckiest Man in the World by Molly Cutpurse, narrated by John Crabtree PhD from his notes recorded at the time. Chapter 19.
25th of June, 2026. After 4 days travelling north, myself and Caroline had plenty of time to fine-tune the plan I had to deal with Maximilian once and for all, and for me to cogitate about the final thing I had to do, which I kept to myself for reasons which I hoped everybody would one day understand. The first plan was to basically keep out of the public spotlight until we naturally caught up with the 29th of June 2026, which, if you remember, was when I made the decision to destroy my hand. Therefore, we had to be on the road for about 2 months, and as comfortable as the beast was, after that amount of time eating takeaways and living in cramped quarters, compared to the spacious houses and flats we owned, and after we had visited just about every place of interest in Scotland, we were all becoming slightly irritated and feeling as if we were in some sort of movable prison. Therefore, all too quickly we realised that life on the road wasn't as freeing as we imagined it might be. Gypsies we were not, and by the time of the date above, we were all glad to see and smell London again, having clocked up over 4,000 kilometres. Nevertheless, such a journey did have its perks, and by the time it ended, Caroline and I undoubtedly became close enough for the family to notice anyway, and for them to pass 1 or 2 remarks. I think it goes without saying that I was pleased to have found someone at long last, and although I still didn't understand what she saw in me, I now ceased to question her or myself. However, there was one last thing on my mind that I wasn't able to understand, and that was how we originally met that time outside the Bank of England, and then at that time outside my mini-mart. You might think that information was easy to obtain. Just ask Caroline. However, the problem was that she had no memory of meeting me on those occasions, and had no memory of pretending to be American, and no memory of sitting with me and talking. So, after a great deal of deliberation, the only obvious action to take was that she had to go back in time to rectify this. And that's why we parked the vehicle close to the underground station, and I took Caroline back to when it all began for me. As I have already described what happened that day, I'm not going to repeat myself. But I can report that after I finally collected her again from close to my flat, she told me that everything went as expected. I was certainly more than pleased that that experience, that possible time loop that had previously been unexplainable, had now been closed. 29th of June, 2026. So this was the important day. Somewhere in Scotland, from behind thick walls of concrete, Caroline had risked her half-brother's displeasure and had freed me. And consequently, as per her threat, and from a safe distance, my entire family and Caroline watched as 11 of Maximilian's G-men surrounded my parents' house, illegally entered, and came out empty. It was one of the many times that Caroline and I smiled at each other, as we knew that Maximilian would be furious that he had been outwitted. However, There was a long way to go yet, and for safety's sake, I still wasn't happy about my family returning to their house, so they had to stay in the Beast for at least the next few days. However, staying with my family was not mine and Caroline's intention, and it was that came under discussion that evening as we ate a sit-down Chinese at our favourite restaurant. Caroline made my situation extremely clear from the beginning, telling my parents that Maximilian always spends his weekends at his flat in Mayfair, and told me that I now only had two choices: kill Maximilian or send him somewhere where he cannot do any more harm to anybody. If he doesn't, she said with a grim expression, then I would always be looking over my shoulder. This flat expression of intent was not only received easily, and my mother was truly shocked. John cannot kill anybody. He hasn't got it in him. And there I had to agree, which is why I interrupted her. Caroline knows that, Mother, which is why the second suggestion is the one that I'll be taking. Let me get this right, son. You are going to remove him to another time entirely? Yes, Father. To where? That's undecided yet. So much depends on the way things unfold on the day. And these are the only two options you've thought will work. Yes, Mother. It's clear he won't give up. What about going to the police? We can't be that certain, Father, but he might own, perhaps, certain sections of it. That's far too dangerous an idea, Mr. Crabtree, said Caroline. Honestly, I know my brother better than most, and that's true. When he gets the bit between his teeth, he becomes relentless, and he wields so much power because of his wealth. So John really doesn't have much of a choice. It's one of those kill or be killed situations, except that John's not actually going to kill anybody. My parents were not exactly thrilled at the word kill and the prospect of it, but at least were able to understand that something rash had to be done. The best and only time to do it will be next weekend. Why then? Asked my mother. Because, as I said, he always spends the weekends there when he's in London, and if we know when and where he is, it'd be easier for us. So, basically, that was it. I did so want to tell everybody that I was going to do what I was going to do after I dealt with Maximilian, but I was still unable to bring myself around to it. Odd. Even at that stage I felt it was so wrong to keep something this important from Caroline, but in the back of my mind there still existed this fear that I was not able to trust anybody 100%. Much of this unfounded fear was to do with the paranoia that I had undergone when I was ill. But all the same, it was there constantly, and my condition wasn't helped when Maggie took me aside and secretly advised me to trust Caroline, but to keep an eye on her. And although Caroline and I were by that time way beyond the kissing stage, being that we're all so cooped up together in the Beast, there was no chance of our relationship developing any further. So wait we did. And after finding a better place to park for a few days, we whiled away our days doing the same old things, each of us champing at the bit to get back to our normal lives. 4th of July, 2026. Caroline and I left the Beast on Saturday morning. My father shook my hand, and my mother kissed me on my cheek, and so did my sisters, and hardly surprising, reluctantly, We walked in silence to Wanstead tube station under a brilliantly clear sky and a day that was threatening to be warm. It was an easy journey on the Central Line, and we arrived at New Bond Street station on the Elizabeth Line in exactly the same unhurried manner. As Maximilian's flat was situated in Upper Grosvenor Street, it didn't take us long to walk to it. I will admit that as we stood on the corner with South Audley Street, my mouth was dry, and I felt highly alert. It felt as if we were about to engage with an insane, man-eating tiger. Not that I would, of course, but that's the image that just rushed into my head. The overall plan was simple enough. As Caroline had a key, entering the flat would be easy, and the idea was that she was going to distract her brother while I dealt with him, sending him back to when the flats were built, which Caroline told me was 1931. My next objective, as repugnant as that was to me personally, was to strike him until he was unconscious, and then drag him to the ground floor by way of the back stairs, where I could properly take him to a time where he could do no more damage to anybody. That was the plan anyway, and honestly, I thought that 95% of that was probably going to go wrong, because for a start I'd never struck anybody in my entire life. Just how much force does it take to make a person unconscious? I hadn't a clue. Ready? Not really. Are you sure this is the best and only way, Caroline? Come on. The quicker we do this, the quicker it will be over. If nothing else, my brother is a creature of habit, and... She looked at her watch. He'd be more than likely to be still in his bed. Come on. Unlike my own building, there was no human in reception, and after using a passcode and a key, we took the lift to the 10th floor and gingerly emerged into a softly carpeted short hallway which had only 2 doors. Having been there once before, I knew which one was Maximilian's, and we silently listened at the door. Hearing nothing, Caroline opened it, and we crept in. As I was well aware, the main sitting room was straight in front, and a few cautious and silent steps took us there. It was dark, as the heavy curtains had not been opened, and I smelt the lingering odour of stale tobacco. And just as I turned to Caroline, I heard an unusual click, and then was confused. Why was she pointing a gun straight at my face? I was so discombobulated that I couldn't even speak, but my body had some form of muscle memory, and I automatically raised my hands as if having a gun levelled at me was part and parcel of my everyday life. But however I felt, Caroline's expression was hard. Max, she called. It's okay. From a door, which I thought led to the kitchen, Maximilian and Charles appeared. And while her brother was smiling, Charles too was pointing a gun at me. So, my dear sister, the little fish fell for it, huh? Finally, I managed to say something. Caroline, what's going on? Shut up, John, you unbearable freak. God, I hate the sound of your whinging voice almost as much as your own family. You planned this? This was a... You are right, Caroline. A bloody genius he may be with numbers. He's a quarter short of $1. Caroline carefully and steadily moved around, pointing the gun at me continuously, until she reached Maximilian, where he placed his arm round her shoulders. After Charles had lowered his weapon and reholstered it in his inside coat pocket, he too began to relax. So, thank you for arriving under your own steam, as it were. You've certainly spared me a great deal of trouble. This time we fly there, you will know exactly where your destination is. Charles, toss him the cuffs." From seemingly nowhere, Charles produced handcuffs and threw them at my feet, where I could only stare at them. "John, this may only be a small caliber handgun, but at this distance I can shatter your kneecap in a heartbeat. I've been a good shot all my life. I suggest you don't do anything that will make me trigger happy. So now you will put your hands behind you and you will allow Charles to make you inactive." Slowly I picked up the cuffs, and holding them by finger and thumb, I gently put my hands behind me, realizing that there was no way in the world I was able to operate the marks if I couldn't see them. I did have a momentarily stupid idea of just touching them randomly, but knowing that I was on the 10th floor, and because Caroline was watching me intently, never moving that gun away from my face, I did what I was told. "Why, Caroline? Why rescue me in the first place?" But she never answered. All she did was stare viciously at me. "Charles," said Maximilian, "lock him up." Charles walked towards me, his arm already outstretched. But without any notice, there was the explosive sound of Caroline's gun firing, and Charles's entire body twisted and fell. Although he was silent, his body made a thud as he collapsed. The entire thing was extremely strange, unexpected, and overall had a dreamlike quality to it. I had momentarily closed my eyes at the sound, but opened them almost straight away to see Caroline swinging her gun high above her head before bringing it down hard on Maximilian's skull. He collapsed immediately as well. "Come on, John, get those cuffs on Charles quickly." "What the hell is going on?" "We are doing what we came here to do. Sorry about the subterfuge, but I knew if we was to do it the way you were going to do it, I had a feeling it wouldn't work." "You shot him." "Only in the shoulder, a flesh wound. Here, get over it. Roll him over and cuff him. And hurry. We've got to get my lovely brother down 20 flights of stairs before he comes round." "Jesus! Why didn't you tell me that was your plan?" "Because I've only just thought of it on the tube. You sat there looking like a frightened rabbit." My apologies for the deception, but I knew it was important that both of them, especially Charles, believed that they were in control. Maximilian's life is centred around control. Once I thought of it, I texted Max. "How hard did you hit him?" "Hard enough. And that's another reason, John, because I saw your face when I first suggested it." Jesus, what a family. "Tell me, is it done?" "Yeah." You just going to leave him there?" "Yeah, he'd deal with himself." "Charles, listen to me." I saw his eyes open, and anyone could see that he was in pain, but there was no significant amount of blood on him or the carpet. "Listen to me properly. Maximilian's going away and he's never coming back. You understand? So take whatever is yours and whatever else you think might be valuable and walk away. You understand? I said, do you understand?" He nodded. "You are a bad piece of crap in your own right. You've done many distasteful things while in my brother's employment. But that's all over now, understand? Of course, if you are that loyal, you can join my brother where he's going." He shook his head. "Didn't think so. So get out and don't come back. This place will be sold anyway. Okay, John? If you take his shoulders, I'll take his legs. Let's do this." As we were pulling, tugging and lifting Maximilian down 20 flights of stone stairs, I felt as if I were taking part in some Hitchcockian nightmare. It was so surreal. I was a highly regarded mathematician, for God's sake. All I ever desired was a quiet life with my books and my thoughts. When we reached the ground floor, Maximilian was still unconscious, and Caroline and myself relaxed for a few moments, pretty much out of breath. She looked at me hard. It's time, John, and don't look at me like that. He's got to be dealt with because he's relentless. And if you let him live in this time, then... I know. All right, unbearable freak. Sorry, that's all I could think of off the top of my head. What date will you use? One easy for me to enter. 1000 AD. Ouch. There's a time you won't be able to screw with. Well, he always did prefer French food to British. Are you going to do it then? Are you really sure? I mean, it's so long ago that if you change your mind, the chances of finding him again they're virtually nil. Just do it, John, and get back safely. I'm not having second thoughts. It was one of those times that a person has to do something loathsome in order to prevent something even more detestable happening. And in the depths of my being, I knew it. So although I had reservations, there was not a lot else that I could do but curl my arm through his and touch the appropriate marks. Accompanied by a series of flickering flashes, we disappeared from the 4th of July 2026. And I reappeared far later than I had expected, just over 3 minutes later, according to Caroline, who was quietly freaking out in her own way, not knowing how long she ought to wait before she gave up on my returning. When I did materialise, I was hardly in the best condition. I was soaking wet and in pain. I arrived groaning and already lying down. My pain, though, was not apparent to Caroline at first as she stared at me. What? John, are you okay? What happened? Lift me up, can you? I need to get to a hospital. I've done something bad to my ankle. Let's get you upstairs first. No, phone for one now, then get me upstairs. Leaning on her, we shuffled into the foyer and took the lift back to the 10th floor. After we entered the flat, she removed my wet clothes and pulled on an old-fashioned dressing gown around me. I didn't like the look of my left ankle at all because my swollen foot was at a very unnatural angle, so clearly it was broke. She made me a cup of sweet tea and we waited. What happened? Not a great deal in the scheme of things. The moment we got there, I instantly knew something was wrong because there was nothing underneath us. We appeared in the thickest forest I'd ever seen and about half a metre off the ground. So of course we fell. He was still out of it, so lucky him. But when I hit the ground, I heard this snapping sound and the pain was unbelievable. I think I landed on a bloody rock, but I can't say for sure what happened, but that's the result. Christ, look at it. We're told the ambulance people that you did it stepping out of the bath. They believe that. I thought those marks were somehow supposed to help you avoid things. When did you use them? So did I. Christ, have you got any painkillers in this place? Best not to take anything, John. When they get here, they'll probably give you something more powerful than aspirin. Something cold then, anything. When the paramedics arrived, once they saw what I had done to myself, events moved swiftly. And I and Caroline were taken to Charing Cross Hospital, accident and emergency, where staff immediately began to take care of me. Although we knew Charles was still in the flat somewhere, probably in his room, we kept silent about him. I left it to Caroline to tell reception and then my family what had happened. Although she told me after I had come out of surgery that she did not give the reason to them how I managed to break my ankle. She did, though, give them the very good news that the problem had been successfully resolved and that they were free to leave the beast and return to their house. 5th of July 2026. In total, we were in the hospital for 17 hours, So by the time a taxi dropped us back at Upper Grosvenor Street, it was early and the sun had not been up for all that long. We were both relieved that Charles was gone, and all that was left of him was blood-stained towels in the bathroom. I was immediately put to bed, and Caroline put me in one of the spare bedrooms and made sure that I took the tablets which the hospital had supplied. As it happens, she turned out to be a decent nurse, and after she had made me comfortable, sat on the bed talking, and the very welcome drugs began to flood over me. What a day, eh? Thwarted a criminal mastermind and broke my first bone. I wouldn't have said that my brother was a criminal. He was far too clever for that. Caroline, what's the matter? Oh, it's just that it's hard for me to get my head around what's happened, that's all. I mean, he's dead now, isn't he? Dead and forgotten. Died in whatever miserable way he did. I mean, he doesn't even exist now. Not even his bones. I mean, he died 1,000 years ago. How can I get to understand that? Caroline, are you regretting what we did? It's too late for that now, isn't it? I mean, like you said, you'd be hard-pressed to find him again. Now it's just me trying to get my head around everything. Now I've got to deal with the stuff I hadn't thought of before. Such as his professional life, his contacts, his business arrangements. After report his disappearance, I have to take control of the estate, our money, our heritage, the few family members that remain. Don't you have any help? Now that Charles has gone, it will be more difficult. He knew a lot of things. He knew where a lot of things were. Do you think he could be trusted? Somewhere out there with your bullet in his shoulder? He'd be a stupid man if he tried anything, because that's one thing he is not. Sooner or later, when it's confirmed that Maximilian is no longer coming back, he will guess what we've done. And as I said, he's not a stupid man. But he was a loyal one, wasn't he? He was, but there are limits to loyalty. Remember the way he shook his head? I guess my parents were glad of your call. Over the moon. I told them that you'd stay here for a couple of days until you feel better. Better enough to get out and about. Good. Because I don't want to face my father just yet. Not for what I'm going to ask him to do. I should imagine that he'd been nothing but grateful for the way you've handled things. Oh, I guess he might, but that's not what I mean. Go on, what do you mean? When I feel better, perhaps after my ankle is healed, I'm going to ask him to remove my hand. There was silence, and Caroline's eyes bored into me. What are you talking about? It's the only way, Caroline. I don't want this anymore. I want to return to being a normal, everyday sort of person. Your dad won't do that, will he? He's a surgeon, Caroline. There's nobody in a better position to do it. Only this time, after it's done, he'll be given strict instructions to destroy it by incineration. John, don't look at me like that, Caroline. But that's such a drastic step. And I'm going to come clean to the media afterwards. I'll announce it. So that will put a stop to everything. The morons will return to their mother's basement. The papers will stop haranguing me and give me a bit of time. It will all stop. And don't you think that by admitting it in the first place, the authorities are going to put two and two together regarding Maximilian's complete disappearance? So what if they do? They won't exactly be in a position to prove anything. You would give it all up. What about helping people? Remember how grateful that woman was because you and Jennifer prevented her father's death? You can't put a price on that. I'm sorry, Caroline, but my mind's made up. Look at me. Broken, distressed, estranged, harangued, and don't forget hated. Thank you. Very funny. But it isn't, is it? While I have these marks, I'll never find peace, never have a chance of a normal life. Yes, I know that no one will understand, but they're forgetting time, and sooner or later I'll fade into obscurity. And what will you do until then? well, I'll still have money. I'll go away somewhere where nobody knows me. Well, good luck with that, because apart from the President of the United States, Paul McCartney, the King, Oboe and Harry Potter, you are just about the most recognisable person on the planet. Don't exaggerate. Who's Oboe? A pop star. Good grief, have you never heard of him? Okay, have it your way. If you think you can handle the shit that's going to be thrown your way, because you'll break about 7 billion people's dreams, and honestly, I don't even think you know the meaning of the word hate yet. It's no good trying to scare me, Caroline. What's the alternative? Live with this and be beholden to everybody. I'd rather be dead. In fact, my idea for living in the 1930s is becoming more attractive by the second. Don't try and kid me. You'd hate it there. If you think you're alone here, what do you think it'd be like back there? Maybe okay for a regular person, someone who is sociable, but that's not exactly you, is it? Back then, the only people you'd find interesting is other mathematicians. Tell me I'm wrong. Back then, you'd be more isolated than ever. And besides, what about me and my feelings? Don't they factor in your calculations? She was right, of course. Although I didn't want to admit it, I had a feeling that she wouldn't be pleased with my idea. But I was disturbed by how affronted she was. Would the world's population really turn on me? For what? Not helping them? Okay, perhaps that's not the best idea I've ever had, but I think it's about time you got some rest, John. When you get up, we can have lunch. What are you going to do? Spend the morning on the phone and writing emails, I suppose. I've got a story to invent. Go on, get some rest. I'll bring you a coffee at midday. She rose and closed the curtains and gave me a meaningful stare before she closed the door. That evening, with me feeling far better, I spoke to my mother, and she confirmed that everything was okay, except for a group of strangers who were earlier hanging round the street outside their front gate. But she told me that Father had called the police and they had moved on. I told her what I could about what I had been doing, but I really wanted to keep that story until I met her and Father face to face. The beast had been sold back to Essex Motorhome Hire at a profound loss, and she tried to convince me that everything had returned to normal, but there was a tremor in her voice that was unusual, and I guess that my father was listening to the conversation. Apparently, among other things, there were monetary fines to be made to Zoe's school for her missing days, and Maggie had been given a written warning about her absenteeism. Father either didn't want to speak to me, or Mother wouldn't let him, but we were not interrupted. I ended the call by saying that I would be over in a couple of days, and that she was not to worry, because Caroline was taking good care of me.
You have been listening to an audio production of The Luckiest Man in the World by Molly Cutpurse, narrated by John Crabtree PhD.